In 1941, while Europe was engulfed in war, the Philippines seemed peaceful under American rule. Life went on as usual, but beneath the surface, the islands were a strategic prize, an American stronghold in Asia and a barrier to Japan's ambitions. For Japan, the US presence in the Philippines was a direct threat to its plans for dominance in the region. Few in Manila could imagine the devastation about to unfold as Japan prepared a bold military strike. On December 8, 1941, the calm shattered. The war arrived with the roar of Japanese bombers. The Philippines' location made it the key to the Pacific. Nestled between the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean and the resource-rich lands of Southeast Asia, the Philippine archipelago was more than just a collection of islands. It was a strategic crossroads, a gateway that connected east and west, north and south. Whoever controlled the Philippines could project power across the Pacific, influence vital shipping lanes, and dominate the region's trade and military movements. For Japan, the Philippines stood directly in the path to the vital resources of Southeast Asia: oil, rubber, tin, and other materials essential for fueling its war machine. The Japanese military planners saw the islands as both a barrier and a bridge. If they could seize the Philippines, they would have a clear route to the Dutch East Indies and British Malaya, where vast reserves of oil and rubber awaited. These resources were critical for Japan's ambitions, as the nation lacked natural supplies of its own and faced crippling embargoes from the West. For the United States, the Philippines represented more than a distant colony. The islands were a symbol of American power in Asia, a forward base that projected influence across the Pacific. They were also a promise, an assurance to the Filipino people of eventual independence and self-determination. The U.S. presence in the Philippines was a statement to the world that America was committed to defending its interests and its allies in the region. General Douglas MacArthur, a legendary figure in American military history, was tasked with defending the islands. But the reality on the ground was grim. His forces, a mix of American and Filipino soldiers, were undertrained, poorly equipped, and spread thin across the archipelago. Supplies were limited, and many soldiers lacked even basic gear. Despite their determination, they faced overwhelming odds against a well-prepared and battle-hardened Japanese force. Japanese strategists knew that leaving the Philippines in American hands was not an option. The islands posed a direct threat to their southern advance. If the U.S. retained control, American bombers and naval forces could disrupt Japanese supply lines and threaten their conquests. The Japanese plan was clear: strike fast, strike hard, and eliminate the American presence before it could mount a meaningful defense. The attack on Pearl Harbor and the invasion of the Philippines were two sides of the same plan: cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet and simultaneously seize the Philippines. By doing so, Japan aimed to paralyze American military power in the Pacific, buy time to consolidate its gains, and secure the resources it desperately needed. The fate of the Pacific would be decided in these opening moves. As bombs fell and armies advanced, the fate of millions hung in the balance. Ordinary Filipinos found themselves caught in the crossfire, forced to flee their homes, endure occupation, and face the uncertainty of war. The struggle for the Philippines was not just a clash of empires, but a human tragedy that would shape the destiny of a nation and the course of the entire Pacific War. News of Pearl Harbor reached Manila on December 8, 1941. Despite the warning, American bombers sat exposed on Luzon's airfields, waiting for orders that never came. Japanese planes struck, destroying U.S. air power in hours and leaving the islands defenseless from the sky. With air supremacy secured, Japanese troops landed at multiple points, quickly overwhelming the unprepared defenders. The main invasion at Lingayen Gulf was swift and devastating. A second landing at Layman Bay completed the encirclement of Manila. The American-Filipino plan to stop the enemy at the beaches collapsed. The campaign for the Philippines had begun in disaster for the Allies. In the face of overwhelming Japanese forces, General Douglas MacArthur made the agonizing decision to abandon Manila, the heart of the Philippines. The city, once bustling with life and hope, now stood on the brink of disaster. MacArthur, a symbol of Allied resistance in the Pacific, knew that staying would mean certain destruction for his troops and the city itself. With a heavy heart, he prepared to leave behind the capital he had sworn to defend, understanding that survival and the hope of future victory depended on a strategic withdrawal. He ordered all American and Filipino forces to retreat to the rugged Bataan Peninsula and the island fortress of Corregidor. These locations, chosen for their natural defenses, offered the best chance to hold out against the advancing Japanese army. The retreat was not just a military maneuver, it was a race against time. As enemy troops closed in from all directions, the withdrawal quickly turned chaotic. Tens of thousands of soldiers, along with countless civilians, flooded the roads leading out of Manila. Families clung to each other, carrying what little they could, while exhausted troops marched alongside them. The air was thick with fear and uncertainty, as everyone desperately tried to stay ahead of the relentless Japanese advance. The roads became choked with refugees and military convoys, stretching for miles under the hot tropical sun. In a desperate attempt to slow the enemy, Allied engineers worked around the clock to destroy bridges and block key routes. Explosions echoed across the countryside as vital crossings were blown up, creating obstacles for the Japanese forces. Soldiers stood guard at these demolition sites, buying precious time for their comrades and the fleeing civilians. Every destroyed bridge was a small victory, delaying the inevitable but never stopping it completely. On December 26, 1941, Manila was officially declared an open city. This meant that all defensive operations within the city ceased, in the hope of sparing it from total destruction by the enemy. The decision was a painful one, as it meant surrendering the capital without a fight, but it was made to protect the lives of innocent civilians and preserve the city's historic landmarks from bombardment. Japanese troops marched into Manila unopposed, their columns moving through silent, deserted streets. The occupation began swiftly and ruthlessly, marking the start of a dark and brutal chapter for the city and its people. The once vibrant capital now fell under harsh military rule, with fear and uncertainty gripping every household. Meanwhile, the defenders who had made it to Bataan found themselves trapped and isolated. Supplies of food, medicine, and ammunition were dangerously low. Disease and exhaustion spread rapidly among the troops who dug in and prepared for a siege. Cut off from reinforcements and surrounded by the enemy, their situation grew more desperate with each passing day. The hope among the defenders was to hold out until help could arrive from the United States. But with the U.S. Navy crippled by the attack on Pearl Harbor, any chance of rescue or reinforcement was quickly fading. The soldiers on Bataan realized they were on their own, forced to rely on their courage and determination to survive. As the Japanese tightened their grip, the stage was set for a desperate last stand. The defenders of Bataan, outnumbered and undersupplied, prepared to fight to the end, hoping their sacrifice would buy time for the Allies to regroup and eventually liberate the Philippines. In January 1942, the Battle of Bataan began. The defenders, using the jungle terrain, repelled initial Japanese attacks and shocked the enemy with their resistance. But supplies dwindled, hunger and disease ravaged the troops. Makeshift hospitals overflowed, medicine ran out. From Corregidor, MacArthur directed the defense until ordered to escape to Australia, vowing, "I shall return." General Wainwright took command as the Japanese prepared their final assault. In April, a massive offensive broke the exhausted defenders. On April 9, 1942, Bataan surrendered. Tens of thousands became prisoners. Corregidor held out for another month before falling. The worst was yet to come for the captured soldiers. The surrender at Bataan led to the infamous Death March. 75,000 prisoners, already starving and sick, were forced to march 65 miles to Camp O'Donnell. Japanese guards showed no mercy. Those who faltered were killed. Civilians risked their lives to help, but many were punished or killed for their compassion. Thousands died along the way. Many more perished in the squalid prison camp. The Death March became a symbol of Japanese brutality and fueled Allied resolve. For Filipinos, it was a searing reminder of their sacrifice. The scars of the march would never fade. With organized resistance crushed, the Japanese occupation began. Food shortages, fear, and brutality became daily realities. Yet the Filipino spirit was unbroken. Guerrilla groups formed across the islands. Former soldiers, farmers, students, and even communists joined the fight. Guerrillas sabotaged Japanese operations and gathered intelligence for the Allies. Their efforts tied down Japanese troops and provided vital information to MacArthur in Australia. The resistance was dangerous. Capture meant torture or death, and reprisals were brutal. Still, the movement grew, controlling large swaths of countryside. The guerrilla war kept hope alive during the darkest days of occupation. For more than 2 long and harrowing years, the people of the Philippines endured the harsh realities of Japanese occupation. Daily life was marked by fear, deprivation, and uncertainty, as families clung to hope in the face of oppression. Yet, through it all, one promise echoed in their hearts: General Douglas MacArthur's solemn vow, "I shall return." This pledge became a beacon of hope, whispered in secret, written on walls, and passed from one generation to the next, sustaining the Filipino spirit during the darkest days of war. In the closing months of 1944, the tide of war shifted dramatically. The United States Navy, now a formidable force in the Pacific, prepared for a massive campaign to liberate the Philippines. Powerful warships and thousands of troops gathered, their mission clear: to fulfill MacArthur's promise and free the islands from Japanese control. The anticipation was electric, as American and Filipino forces alike readied themselves for the battles ahead. The invasion began with the landing at Leyte, which set off the largest naval battle in history, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. For days the seas roared with the thunder of guns and the skies filled with aircraft. American and Japanese fleets clashed in a desperate struggle for control of the Philippines. The outcome would shape the fate of the Pacific War. In the end, the Japanese fleet was shattered, suffering devastating losses in ships and men. The once mighty Imperial Navy was left crippled, unable to halt the Allied advance. With the seas cleared, the way to the Philippine Islands was finally open, and hope surged among the Filipino people. On October 20, 1944, General MacArthur made good on his promise. Wading ashore on the beaches of Leyte, he declared, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." His words, broadcast across the islands, ignited a wave of emotion and renewed determination among Filipinos everywhere. Across the archipelago, Filipino guerrillas, who had resisted Japanese rule in secret, now rose up openly, joining forces with the advancing Americans. Their knowledge of the land and unwavering courage proved invaluable, as they sabotaged enemy positions, gathered intelligence, and guided Allied troops through treacherous terrain. The battle for Luzon, the largest island, was especially fierce. In Manila, the capital, brutal street fighting erupted as American and Filipino forces fought block by block to liberate the city. The destruction was immense, and the cost in lives was staggering. Japanese troops, refusing to surrender, unleashed a campaign of terror, destroying buildings, setting fires, and massacring civilians in a final act of defiance. The city was left in ruins, its people traumatized by the violence and loss. The suffering was immense, and the scars of war would linger for generations. Yet, amid the devastation, the end of occupation was finally in sight. The resilience and bravery of the Filipino people had carried them through. The liberation of the Philippines had truly begun. Town after town was freed, and celebrations erupted as American and Filipino flags were raised once more. The long-awaited return of MacArthur marked not just a military victory, but the restoration of hope and freedom for an entire nation. By summer 1945, the Philippines was free, but at a staggering cost. Over 1 million Filipinos dead, cities in ruins. The war left deep scars but also forged a bond between the Philippines and the United States. On July 4, 1946, the Philippines became an independent nation. The struggle for freedom had accelerated independence but left the country reliant on U.S. aid. The Bataan Death March and Manila Massacre remain stark reminders of war's horrors. Yet the courage of the defenders and the resilience of the people defined a nation. Their story is a lesson in sacrifice, endurance, and the enduring cost of war.